Madam President.
Senator from Iowa.
Madam, first I ask unanimous consent that Brianna Steyer, Grant Gregory, and Jasper Verhofstadt be granted floor privileges for the remainder of today's session.
Without objection.
Madam President, I am pleased to join with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and in both chambers today in taking up the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It's a reauthorization of what we always called the WIA bill, the Workforce Investment Act of 1998. As the chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, I can say that we have worked on this bill, the one that we have here, now for 5 years. This is the first reauthorization since 2003 of the Workforce Investment Act. And I especially want to express my appreciation to Senator Isaacson, Senator Murray, Senator Alexander, for their great working relationship in sticking to it for all these years when it was sort of, didn't know if we were ever going to make it or not. And I see that our former ranking member, Senator Enzi, is here, who started with that when he was ranking member, and I want to thank him also for all of his work to get to this point. What's that old saying, you know, slow cooking beats fast food any day? This is kind of slow cooking, home cooking, and it took a while, but some of these things do take time. They just take time to work out and get things ironed out. I understand that, but again, I just can't express my appreciation enough to my colleagues, as I mentioned, Senator Isaacson, Senator Enzi, Senator Murray, Senator Alexander, for their stick-to-itness and never giving up and making sure that we got to this point. I'd also just like to thank my House colleagues who worked closely with us over the last several months, Representatives Klein, Miller, Fox, and Hinojosa. During those months of negotiations, we reached a compromise between the reauthorization bill that the House had passed last year and the bill that we passed out of committee in July of last year. And so, again, with the great work of, as I said, of Senator Murray, Senator Isaacson, working with our House colleagues, we have a really good bill, and it has the broad support, broadly from employers to mayors to governors to organized labor. Everybody is now supporting this bill. I suppose like any piece of legislation that comes through here, I assume that each one of those entities probably didn't get everything they wanted, but that's the art of compromise and the art of getting good legislation through. And it couldn't come at a better time and a more needed time for reauthorization. As our economy continues to recover from one of the worst economic recessions in our history, it's more critical than ever that we stand with our nation's workers, our businesses, our young people, citizens with disabilities, with a commitment to help them prosper in the new jobs of the future. Our economy has undergone substantial changes since the first Workforce Investment Act bill of 1998. In fact, over the last 40 years, America's backbone, the middle class, has been finding it harder and harder to make ends meet as wages have stagnated, costs have risen, and quite frankly, a lot of the jobs of the past are gone. A lot of those jobs aren't coming back. We have a new economy that we're now entering. And so people need to be trained, and a lot of people need to be retrained and skills upgraded for these new jobs of the future. And that's what this bill does. It's part of the solution to this challenge facing our middle class in America. Access to education, training, employment services is critical to helping our workers secure good jobs, gain access to the middle class, become economically self-sufficient. This new bill includes provisions that support our state workforce development systems in providing employment and training services for adults, dislocated workers, and youth through state grant programs and the Public Employment Service. It also supports disconnected youth through programs such as an updated youth program focused on out-of-school youth who need a second chance, such as Job Corps and Youth Build. It provides for employment and training activities for Native Americans and migrant and seasonal farm workers. It supports adult learners through adult education and literacy programs. including services for English language learners. This bill includes innovative approaches to providing workforce development activities, including industry and sector partnerships, on-the-job and income-at-worker training, transitional job strategies for those who have poor work histories, but who would like to have more steady, upgraded jobs, workplace learning advisors who can help educate colleagues about services available in the workforce system. Now, one of the most important parts to me of this bill is a much-needed update to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. I'm particularly pleased that the bill addresses the disproportionate burden of unemployment and underemployment experienced by people with disabilities in our country. Despite the enormous progress we've made in ensuring that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as all Americans, the sad fact is that the unemployment rate among people with disabilities in America is twice as high as people without disabilities, and their workforce participation rate is less than half of that of the general population. So we have, quite frankly, failed to ensure that people with disabilities meaningfully participate in the workforce. This bill makes major steps to correct this injustice. It will help to prepare a new generation of young people with disabilities to prepare for, obtain, and succeed in competitive, integrated employment, not substandard, sub-minimum wage, dead-end jobs, but in jobs in which people with disabilities can learn and grow to their maximum potential. And that's what this bill will do. It will ensure that young people with disabilities, let's say who are in high school and they have their IEP, their individualized education program, they get through high school, but they need to be prepared for transition into the workplace. And so this bill includes things that will give them those experiences, like part-time work, summer jobs, internships, workplace skill development, preparations for jobs that are in high demand. Basically, we're going to give persons with disabilities the same supports and experiences that everyone else expects and receives, which they haven't had in the past. Go through school, part of the IDEA program, they have their IEPs, and then as soon as they quit, they're dropped. That's the end of it. Or maybe they go into sub-minimum wage jobs, and that's where they stay, and they never get skills upgrading. But we have known from experience that people with disabilities, whether it's intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities or a combination of both, they can learn and train, and their skills can be upgraded just like anybody else so that they can perform at their maximum potential. So again, this bill requires state vocational rehabilitation programs to work hand in hand with secondary schools, ensures that employers will have the information necessary to recruit, hire, and retain people with disabilities, and it focuses the efforts of state, again, voc rehabilitation on youth, requiring that 15% of their funds be dedicated to transitioning young people into competitive, integrated employment. These efforts, I hope, will directly address the high unemployment rate among people with disabilities, smooth the transition of young people into the competitive integrated workplace, help employers to support their employees with disabilities. I want to thank my colleagues for working to make this bill one that will address the outrageous status quo facing people with disabilities with regard to employment. And more employers are finding that with a small bit of support or maybe a modification of a workplace, people with disabilities can do those jobs and sometimes do them better than people without disabilities. And more employers are finding that out. But in our former Workforce Investment Act bills and stuff, we didn't really focus on that much. Well, this bill now puts a major focus on that, and that's why I'm so proud of this bill and why I think this bill is such a major step forward in all its regards. Again, I would just say that This bill represents the best of what Congress can accomplish when we work together. We've worked diligently to find areas of agreement in our committee where we could advance legislation on bipartisan basis. I heard Senator Alexander earlier mention this, and it is true that on our committee, we probably have the widest divergence of philosophical views of any committee in the Senate. But we work together, and we work to get things done, both on a Senate level and on a staff level. When this bill passes the Senate, it will mark the 18th bipartisan HELP committee bill to successfully move through the Senate in this Congress, and assuming the President will sign it, it will be the 14th bill passed out of our committee, this Congress, to be signed into law by the President. Now, House leaders have indicated that if the Senate acts swiftly to pass this bipartisan bicameral bill without substantial changes, they will do the same and will be able to advance this bill to the President's desk in very short order. A major victory for our workers, our businesses, our economy. I urge all my colleagues to join us in supporting this bill and voting yes on final passage. Madam President, I yield the floor.